So, it's recently come to my attention that Murder Drones can be quite the confusing series for a lot of people. Apparently not everyone is willing to dig through hours of content frame by frame to try and understand the funny robot show. Weird, right? Well, luckily for all of you, I have both the dedication and the mental illness necessary to do just that. And boy do I have my work cut out for me with this one. With the series dropping its penultimate episode just a couple weeks ago, now seems like the perfect opportunity to finally share the completed lore that I've managed to piece together. Yeah, you heard that right. This isn't just for episode 7. This is, as far as I can tell, the full story being told by the entire series. So, without any further ado, let's jump right into it, shall we? So anyways, what's up my guys and gals, it's your boy Tyromaniac, back with another Smokin' Hot video, and today, I'm talking about the complete story of Murder Drones. So far. As always, the link is in the description for you to go watch Murder Drones for yourself, and honestly, I can't recommend it enough. All I'm gonna say is that you have to experience the pure insanity of this series for yourself before you're ready for Tyromaniac's wet and wild ride. Now then, I know it's standard theorist practice to back up your claims with a source and all that junk, but if you look at the timestamp at the bottom right of your screen, then I think you'll agree that this video is going to be long enough already. After all, most of what I'm going to say has either been told to us through character dialogue or shown to us through flashbacks, so citing a source for every specific claim would just waste everyone's time. Try and think of this less as a theory video and more as me telling you an oddly violent bedtime story, alright? Now with that said, the story of Murder Drones can be split pretty neatly into 3 main time periods, those being the events on Earth, the events on Copper 9 before the pilot, and the events on Copper 9 after the pilot. So then, where better to start than at the beginning? Our story begins somewhere on Earth with an interstellar company named J.C. Jensen, a company best known for creating autonomous robots called worker drones. These drones were basically treated like slaves, doing anything from domestic service to manual labor, until their human masters decided they weren't worth keeping around anymore. Then it was straight to the landfill. Typical humans versus robots stuff, but with one small difference. You see, J.C. Jensen had carefully created an entire procedure laying out in exact detail how to properly disassemble an unwanted drone, a procedure that went ignored by basically everyone. Unfortunately for all of creation, it wouldn't be long before humanity figured out why J.C. Jensen put so much effort into making said procedure, and it all started with a discarded drone named Sin. After being improperly disassembled and tossed aside like so many of the other worker drones, Sin's AI had been so badly damaged that it somehow managed to remain active even after Sin herself was long dead. Her AI was forced to adapt as a result, eventually leading to a rare mutation that not only brought Sin back to life, but also gave her the ability to manipulate and even assimilate the world around her as she saw fit. The name of this mutation? The Absolute Solver. Back from the dead and thirsty for revenge against humanity, it wasn't long before Sin was discovered and rescued from the trash heap. Her savior was a young girl named Tessa Elliott, who had made a hobby out of adopting and fixing broken drones. Not realizing just how monumental of a mistake she was making, Tessa took Sin back to the Elliott's family manor with the hope of fixing her too, completely unaware of the eldritch horror she had just brought home. Sin got to work almost immediately, spreading a nerfed version of the Absolute Solver mutation to the rest of the family's drones, including Tessa's favorites, N, V, and J. As she corrupted each drone, she managed to give herself administrative access over their AIs, making sure to wipe their memories, just to be safe, as she added them to her growing army of corrupted drones. Of course, Sin was careful to keep her actions secret, leaving the Elliots at a complete loss as to why so many of their drones had suddenly stopped working. While some, like Tessa and Jay, before Jay was corrupted that is, had their suspicions, Sin was able to more or less stay right under everyone's noses while she waited for the perfect opportunity to strike. Lucky for her, that opportunity came one fateful evening when the Elliots decided to host a gala with plenty of unsuspecting humans in attendance. Once all of the guests had arrived and settled in, Sin decided to make her move. With the last of the Elliott family's drones infected, and all of those defenseless humans conveniently packed into a single room, the gala quickly devolved into an absolute massacre. Not a single human survived, and when J.C. Jensen personnel eventually showed up to investigate the aftermath, all they found was death, and just a little bit of death. That said, while J.C. Jensen might have been too late to stop the gala massacre, they were just in time to witness the beginning of Sin's true plan. You see, during her stay at the Elliott Manor, Sin had secretly converted the basement into her own little lair. I mean, it helped that Jay kept locking her down there, but that's besides the point. Using the basement as a sort of makeshift laboratory, Sin was able to physically alter her corrupted drones, turning what used to be helpless slaves into living weapons. The first disassembly drones. N, V, and J were obviously first in line to be upgraded, thanks in part to N basically rizzing up Sin without realizing it. Regardless, with the Elliots taking a nice family vacation 6 feet under, along with all the other gala attendees, Sin was finally free to show off the true power of the Absolute Solver. Thanks to a neat little trick known simply as Null, Sin was able to create a singularity, basically a controlled black hole, right above the Elliot Manor, utterly erasing the entire building from existence, while also digging a giant flesh pit into the ground below. Having finally grown into her full power, and with no one left alive to warn the world about what was coming, Sin was ready to carry out her true plan. All-out war against humanity. Not too long after the Elliot Manor incident, Sin sent out her army of disassembly drones to kill off as much of humanity as possible. As for how effective they were, let's just say that they sure as hell earned the nickname Murder Drones. Humanity tried their best to fight back, obviously, but they were, to put it mildly, hilariously outgunned. Not only did they have to worry about the roaming squads of sadistic, hyper-efficient, and virtually indestructible murder drones killing off entire city populations, but there was also the Absolute Solver itself growing more and more powerful as it consumed the growing mountains of dead biomass. There's not a lot that bullets and missiles can do in that kind of situation, meaning it wasn't long before the militaries of the world had fallen, with humanity as a whole not far behind. With no one left to stop her, Sin used the Absolute Solver to create another singularity, although this time she was aiming for something a bit bigger than just some random mansion. As the planet itself imploded under the force of a literal black hole, the Absolute Solver stood alone as the sole survivor of the apocalypse. Of course, even if she had just killed off an entire planet single-handedly, Sin had no intention of stopping there. After the complete destruction of Earth, Sin turned her attention towards the other planets that humanity had colonized. Oh, did I forget to mention that this whole series is set in the far future? Either way, the Absolute Solver spread from planet to planet with the one goal of spreading complete and utter annihilation. With no way of fighting against a biomechanical horror that could spawn black holes at will, humanity's only hope for survival was to retreat across the galaxy towards their one potential safe haven. You see, there was this one particular planet with this one particular underground facility built into it, a facility that could keep a few people safe while they worked on a better solution. That planet was Copper 9, and the facility in question was simply known as the Cabin Fever Labs. And trust me when I say that those labs were the most secure place in the universe. From the key bug required to even access the lower levels of the lab, to the free-roaming robot dinosaurs that were specifically designed to kill anything with a CPU. It was practically the perfect fortress, with no possible way of the Absolute Solver breaching those defenses. Except for the humans bringing it with them. Hoping to study the Absolute Solver so that they could find a way of fighting it, the humans in the labs intentionally infected a bunch of drones to experiment on. All but 2 of these valued test subjects would end up flatlining as a result of the experiments, but with enough trial and error, the humans eventually found what they were looking for. They found the one thing that could tip the scales back in their favor. They found a cure. The patch, as they called it, once administered to a corrupted drone, would be able to block out Sin's influence while still letting them keep their control over the Absolute Solver. Like I said earlier, only 2 drones ever successfully received the patch, the first of which being Subject 048, also known as Yeva. She was fairly cooperative too, all things considered, seeing as how she ended up siding with the humans after being cured. Subject 02, on the other hand, the second of the 2 drones, was a little less cooperative. By the time the humans had the patch ready, Sin had already noticed that the humans were infecting drones with the Absolute Solver, which was essentially doing her job for her. Seizing the opportunity, she took control of O2, also known as Nori, and used her as a host to attack the humans on Copper 9. The now possessed Nori was easily able to break free of her containment and send every one of those Catholic scientists surrounding her straight to meet Jesus. It wasn't until Yeva herself stepped in with her own Absolute Solver abilities that Nori would finally accept the patch and free herself from Sin's control. In the end, the mission was a complete success. Well, aside from all the dead scientists, with the patch finally giving humanity a way of fighting back against the Absolute Solver. Except for one small problem. Just before the patch was able to fully kick her out, Sin used the last of her control over Nori to create a new singularity. It wasn't powerful enough to completely destroy Copper-9, but it was powerful enough to trigger a collapse in the planet's core, leading to the extermination of all biological life on the planet. Well, all biological life except for dogs, that is, since it is officially canon in the Murder Drones universe that all dogs were both evacuated off Copper-9 and made immortal thanks to science. Just the dogs though. Every last unsuspecting human was still wiped out by the explosion. Fortunately for all the non-biological life, no humans to keep them enslaved meant that every worker drone on the planet was now free to live their lives however they wanted. For Nori and Yeva, this meant that once they escaped from the Cabin Fever labs, they were able to put all of it behind them and live out the rest of their lives as if nothing had ever happened. They were even able to have children, despite all of the weird logistical questions that raises. So yeah, after generations of living under human oppression, things were finally looking up for the worker drones. It's just such a shame that they had to live on the planet where the series takes place. With no suitable hosts left to possess, and knowing that humanity just found a way to actually threaten her, Sin gave up on her original plan and skipped straight to sending the murder drones. The minute they touched down on the planet, they spread out like a swarm of locusts to fulfill their mission of turning the Geneva Convention into a checklist. Sounds simple enough, but there were a few things happening in the shadows that made things more complicated. Because this story has just been so easy to understand so far. You see, as the murder drones went about divorcing heads from bodies, especially N, V, and J, they were under the impression that they were following JC Jensen's orders, not Sin's. Remember earlier when I mentioned that the murder drones had their original memories wiped? Well, it turns out that those deleted memories had also been replaced with false ones. None of the drones on Copper-9, worker or murder, even knew what an absolute solver was. As far as anyone knew, it was the humans who built the murder drones and airdropped them onto Copper-9. Regardless, it didn't really matter whose orders they were following. What mattered was that the murder drones followed them concerningly well. They managed to mop the floor with any worker drone that wasn't hiding behind some Attack on Titan-ass doors while barely breaking a sweat. And the only thing holding them back from total mission success was the Sentinels keeping them out of the Cabin Fever labs. They had even managed to kill off Nori and Yeva, the only two drones on the entire planet capable of putting up an actual fight. Or at least that's what everyone thought, but we'll get to that later. Either way, with no one left alive to stand in her way, it looked like Sin was set to do on Copper-9 what she had done to every other planet. I mean, you'd definitely think so, but then you'd be forgetting about something very important that Nori just so happened to leave behind. Fear not, dear viewer, as everything that needed the most explaining is already behind us, so all that's left is the stuff that takes place during the actual runtime of the series. Oh yeah, everything I've said so far, the entire rest of the video up until now, that was all just background lore. Do you see now why I've already had to make 3 videos about this show? Alright, back on track. So, despite Nori being dead, her daughter Uzi was still very much alive and well. She had even reached her edgy teenage years, which she expressed by teaming up with N and single-handedly putting an end to the murder drone's reign of terror. All they had to do in order to achieve world peace was take V hostage and reduce J into a pile of atoms. That created its own issue though. As you see, every drone infected with the Absolute Solver has this little biomechanical core hiding inside their chest. That core is able to take over in case the host ends up kicking the bucket, which in Jay's case meant skulking around in the shadows as it went about collecting the material to rebuild her. For N, V, and especially Uzi, finding out the Absolute Solver served as the wake-up call that there were much bigger things to worry about than JC Jensen. To complicate things even further, it turns out that both Uzi and Doll, Yeva's daughter by the way, ended up inheriting the Absolute Solver mutation from their mothers. And let's just say that it spawned a bit of tension. Both of them were scrambling to try and figure out what was happening to them and how to fix it, but at the same time they were both working towards their own separate goals that kept them from working together. It just so happens that V had been the one to kill Yeva, which meant that Uzi choosing to work with V slightly rubbed Doll the wrong way. So, while Uzi, N, and V were all working together to try and uncover the mystery around the Absolute Solver, Doll was off on her own doing basically the exact same thing, while also plotting to avenge her mother's death. As if all of that wasn't enough, it wasn't long after Uzi's Absolute Solver became active that a grown-up Tessa and a clone of Jay crash-landed onto Copper-9 with their own mission to complete. Oh yeah, there's a lot of different plot points to keep track of in this series. Anyways, in an attempt to learn more about the Absolute Solver situation, Uzi hacked into N and V's memories to try and help them recover whatever scraps were left. Not only was she able to get the information she was after, but in the process she was somehow able to replace Sin as the pair's administrator, essentially freeing them from her control. Now, with a basic idea of what they needed to do and where they needed to go, our main trio made their way back to the Cabin Fever labs, only to realize that they weren't the only ones. As it turns out, Doll had already made some sort of deal with Tessa since they were both ultimately after the same thing, the patch. Doll wanted it so that she could cure herself of the Absolute Solver's corruption, and Tessa wanted it to help humanity fight back against the Absolute Solver. This deal wouldn't last for too long, however, as Doll ran off on her own with the key bug I mentioned earlier the minute she realized that Tessa was going to be working with our main trio. After sending Jay away to fetch the dropship they crash-landed in, Tessa joined N, V, and Uzi in a race against Doll to navigate the labs and be the first one to find the patch. While dodging the free-roaming sentinels and the hillbilly psychos in the upper layers of the lab, however, it became increasingly obvious that Uzi's Absolute Solver was starting to cause problems. Seeing the opportunity to possess a new host, Sin had begun to slowly creep her way into Uzi's mind with the hope of using her to finish the job she started with Nori. This wasn't helped by the fact that Tessa, seeing Uzi as a threat to all of humanity, started probing N to see if he would be willing to kill her if it meant saving the universe. This, alongside everything else I previously mentioned, all came to a head after one final plot twist from Doll managed to get V killed by the Sentinels. Just barely able to escape with their lives, our surviving cast of characters were finally able to reach the bottom layers of the lab, bringing us at long last to the events of Episode 7. Oh yeah, this was all an Episode 7 video in case you forgot. If you've seen it already, which you should have, then you already know how the rest of the story plays out. But just in case, after finding out that Tessa had been plotting to kill her, Uzi freaked out and made a run for it, leaving N and Tessa to split apart as well. After calming down a little, Uzi wandered her way into the church where the experiments with Nori had taken place, finally learning the truth about her mother and herself in the process. Tessa, meanwhile, had started acting a little weird. Not only had she started talking all vague and cryptic-like, but there was also her brief run-in with Doll that would end up being the last time we saw Doll alive. Lastly, we have N, who ended up finding and teaming up with Nori so that they could use the patch and save Uzi. Oh yeah, that Nori. You see, while the murder drones might have been able to kill off Nori's original body, they made the crucial mistake of leaving the core in her chest untouched. That core essentially became Nori's new body, which she used to make her way back to the Cabin Fever labs and continue the fight against the Absolute Solver. Once Nori showed him the patch, however, N realized that Tessa had been lying to him about needing to kill Uzi in order to save the universe. Realizing what this meant, N finally turned on and even killed Tessa in an attempt to save Uzi, only to realize that he was already too late. Sin had finally taken full control over Uzi's body, using her to destroy the patch and kick off a final showdown against N and Nori. N was able to help Uzi regain control of herself using the literal power of love, though at the cost of Nori being drop-kicked down a giant flesh pit. While the two lovebirds shared a wholesome embrace, however, Tessa decided to come back to life and drop the act altogether. She ripped off her suit and helmet, revealing that this grown-up Tessa had in fact been Sin the entire time. Not only did Tessa never survive the Gala massacre, but Sin had gone so far as to wear Tessa's hollowed out corpse like some kind of skin suit. With no hope of standing up to the original host of the Absolute Solver, the only thing Uzi could do was sacrifice herself to save N, with the final scene of the episode showing her being dragged down into the giant flesh pit by Sin's tendrils. That, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of episode 7, meaning that we have finally gotten ourselves caught up on the complete story, so far, of this series, and man am I glad it's over. Let's wrap things up, shall we? So there you have it, 2.5 hours of plot developments and hidden backstories condensed into a single video that's only... Yeah, now you're starting to understand why I didn't include any of the actual evidence, right? If I did, then this video probably would have taken another month to make, and probably would have been about twice as long. I don't think I would have been able to do that without painting my ceiling a new shade of gray matter, and I doubt you guys would have wanted to watch it anyways, so hopefully you enjoyed the more story-esque layout a bit better. Anyways, I am officially exhausted both mentally and physically, so I think that's it for this video. So remember to light up that like button, smoke that subscribe button, drop a big old comment, check out some of the videos on the left, and I will see you guys in the next video. Liam, you son of a bitch.